Hello and welcome to Good Guys Sports Thanksgiving Special for 2024. I'll be hosting today. My name is Blake Gerke, and I'm joined by our usual crew of Jackson, Blake Limberger, and Mike Roby. And today we're going to be covering a lot of football, NFL and college, and then as well touching upon a little bit of Thanksgiving preview, both in the NFL, college, and as well just some good general Thanksgiving tradition chat with some food, football, all the good stuff. But I do want to start with the NFL. And last weekend, we previewed a couple of the big matchups around the league, notably Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. And I do think a couple of us got some of our predictions right and some of our predictions wrong. I remember I think half of us were on Buffalo, half of us were on Kansas City. And I think ultimately that game ended up going how a lot of us thought, with Kansas City 9-0, maybe feeling the pressure of going undefeated and thinking losing away to Buffalo is not the worst result in the world. More interestingly, though, I think that Baltimore-Pittsburgh game ended up being a little bit different than what a lot of us thought going into that, where I certainly thought that the Ravens offense would end up carrying them across the line, but it ended up being the Pittsburgh defense that maybe a combination of the Pittsburgh defense putting the clamps on Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and maybe you can argue the offense just never really got going in that game, in particular as well. But if after the games last weekend, the standings in the conferences do look very different. It's safe to say, with Pittsburgh having an 8-2 record versus Baltimore now sitting at 7-4. So a lot of people would have thought Baltimore would be atop that division this year, but Pittsburgh at 8-2 is certainly not something that a lot of people would have thought going in before the season. And similarly, with the AFC, the Chiefs are still atop, obviously with their 9-1 record, but Buffalo's just behind them at 9-2. So I want to start kind of with some division chat here, and I think if we're looking at the playoff standings right now, Kansas City is your one seed with the bye, and then behind them we've got Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston. I'm particularly intrigued by that Pittsburgh and Baltimore combo. I wanna start with Uncle Mike, because he's watched Pittsburgh. He saw the Steelers eke out a win over his Commanders two weeks ago. Do you think the Steelers are for real at an 8-2, or do you think maybe their offense, some of the limitations of their offense, is going to come back to bite them if they end up winning that division and making it in the playoffs? I don't know. What's your feel on that division?
I think the Steelers are up and coming. I mean, they're playing much better now than they did at the beginning of the season. Although last weekend, for the second time this season, the Steelers won by kicking 6 field goals.
It was the
Mm.
game in Atlanta was the first one, right?
Yeah. So,
That's I mean
eight
that's got to
eight and
be like
two.
a record, right? I mean, I can't
Yeah.
imagine anybody else has done that before.
Yeah, I don't, but their defense is coming along. Oh, I think they got Watt on their team, the defense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing outstanding. So I would not want to be the Browns this weekend.
Jackson, part of me is really intrigued by this Pittsburgh team, because like Mike is saying, they're playing really good defense and they're finding a way to win. But the other side of me is thinking, well, if they find themselves in a playoff matchup, is kicking 5 field goals really going to get them a win against, the Chargers or even a team like the Broncos in the playoffs? I know they're playing tonight away at Cleveland. That probably isn't too much of a contest given how Cleveland season is going, but just kind of in the AFC, do you think Pittsburgh has a shot to make a run, or are you still not giving up on Baltimore quite yet, Jack? What do you think?
I mean, we're still a long ways to go. The Ravens and Derrick Henry are definitely still not out of it by any doubt, given the fact that we're only in week 12 and anything can happen between now and then. So I think the Ravens still have a shot. Now it's going to be very close. So the Steelers do believe that they are the better team in this division, just slightly, but I could be wrong, and all could change. But the Ravens will definitely be right in there with them. It'll be a very close finish. I think the Steelers will slightly win the AFC North, but it would be very close. And given the fact that the Ravens and
They do still play again as well, head to head later on this year.
right, which their next meeting will be in Baltimore. I think the winner of the Ravens Steelers game will be the division winner of the AFC North, is the way that I see it. So really, in a perspective, I'm leaning towards the Steelers, but but I'm not counting out the Ravens under not counting them out under any circumstance. And I think that I think that they can prove, and even though it was not a great game for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and for John Harbaugh, they will be better than they will get better and improve in practice. But it'll be very close. But it will be very close. But yeah, I'm not yeah, the Ravens will definitely make the playoffs, and I'm definitely not counting, and I'm definitely not counting them out with with without question, to your point. So
Hey,
yes,
Jackson, not so fast. Not so fast.
Hmm.
You remember the Ravens? How did the Ravens start the year off?
Losing to KC.
I think they lost the
they
first two, right?
yeah, they started off on a rough start, and then all of a sudden
That's right.
all of a sudden on this up and down roller coaster, and they just somehow just got back in this thing, and really just really meaning that it's an up and down year, and he just went back and forth, and just really
Jackson's
a
Jackson
lot of,
sometimes
yeah.
sometimes all you need is a little kick in the behind. They got it. Just like the beginning of the year, they're going to be ready to rock and roll. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and a great coach. You might be referring to the Super Bowl champions right here, Jackson. Baltimore strong, baby.
I am well aware.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that, because we've seen in the past couple of years where Baltimore has come out with a really strong regular season, Lamar Jackson MVP, and when it comes to the playoff game, they just aren't really able to replicate it. So, it might be a situation where finishing second in that division, maybe getting a bit of the pressure and the spotlight off them, might actually weirdly end up benefiting them, and maybe sneaking in one of those, wild card positions and going on a run. So it's not necessarily something that I'd be totally shocked at. Pittsburgh getting upset in their round one and then Baltimore sneaking in. It wouldn't shock me at all.
So which Harbaugh brother's going to win Monday night?
It's the Harbaugh Bowl this weekend, eh?
Uh-huh.
Right.
With the Ravens
playing out
taking
in LA.
Ravens going out in LA, right, Jack?
I think I'm going to lean towards Jim, because he is the one that had the more experience, starting with his career at Stanford, won a lot of games there, and followed by the 49ers.
John's been in the NFL longer, though.
Yeah, I know, but he took his team to the Super Bowl, and think about it, he has won a national title, um, and played for the University of Michigan Wolverines. So for the Wolverines, so
we're not in the Big Ten anymore. This is the National Football League, man.
I know, but yeah, I hear you.
Nah, I kind of agree with you, to be honest.
I know. Look, all I'm saying is that wherever Jim Harbaugh goes, whether it's in the pros or the NFL, he always seems to find a way to win. So that's why I'm leaning towards
Correct.
Jim Harbaugh, because of that.
I think what they refer to Jim Harbaugh as a culture setter, Mike, in the industry, where you bring him into a team if you need to establish an identity and a culture, and he likes to run the ball and establish the offensive and defensive line, and so far it's working pretty well for the Chargers.
7-3.
So far the results have been pretty well in kind of that Harbaugh revolution out there in LA, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of cultures in college and NFL, Dion has denied the Cowboys rumors. What do you guys think? What are the chances he ends up with the Cowboys?
It's a really interesting talking point, and I did want to bring up the Cowboys kind of just to cover some of the interesting headlines. I mean, this is certainly a team that's turning into a real circus, if you will, even more so than probably they were. Was obviously we had the game against Philadelphia where the receiver CD Lamb was partially blinded by the sun, not unlike the sunset that Uncle Mike has on his pumpkins there in the background. I think if CD Lamb was just standing right behind those pumpkins, he might have just been unsighted for that touchdown pass in the AT&T Stadium. But they've just had headline after headline.
They hit him in the hand, so.
Right, but I mean, the sun was right in his eyes, so it must have been affected. But I mean, the fact that the Cowboys are losing all these games, people are latching on to these storylines about the sun coming into the stadium, distracting receivers. Obviously, they had the incident on Monday night where parts of the stadium roof were falling off when they were trying to close it. And so, yeah, certainly, I think Jerry Jones probably just cares more about making money than putting a winning product on the field, honestly, if you're going to judge them off of the past couple of seasons. But to Blake's point, it'd be a very Jerry Jones move to bring in, a superstar like Dion. But
I don't see Dion. I don't see Dion leaving.
He's got a good thing going
Colorado.
there. Yeah.
Well, and Colorado just picked up the number 2 recruit, a new quarterback that was supposed to go to USC. Got out of the USC deal and committed to Colorado.
Must mean there's some big money coming in now. Something else that you got to add to this Cowboys thing is it likely would not only be Dion. This could be a Sanders BOGO. This could be a buy one get one free.
Yeah, Belichick could end up in Dallas.
Well, I was thinking about his son. Can his son leave and be the quarterback for take Dak Prescott's hurt position and be the quarterback for the Cowboys? Is that kind of in the rumors as well?
Well, if he gets drafted.
No, I think he'll be one of the top quarterback prospects. I don't know exactly how he's ranked. It seems like it's maybe more the quarterback rankings for this upcoming draft are a bit more up in the air in terms of who you prefer, but he certainly would get drafted, somewhere in the top half, for sure. So and then obviously the other kid from Colorado, Hunter, as well would be.
He's fantastic.
Imagine, he'll certainly.
He had 6 catches last Saturday, 5 on offense and 1 on defense.
That's unreal. I really hope he wins the Heisman. Is he the favorite at this point?
Yeah, he's the favorite.
I hope he wins. I mean, that's incredible what he's doing. Your record for your team. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Come on. This guy, what he's doing is incredible. And it's really helping him that a lot of these big teams have 2 losses. Outside
Colorado's
of Oregon.
8-2, and they're 6-1 in the Big 12, just like BYU, because BYU dropped to Kansas last weekend, and they're playing each other this weekend.
Yes, I think Colorado, and we'll probably touch upon it later, but I think they.
No, I'm sorry. Colorado's playing Kansas Saturday.
Sorry. So they benefit from being able to possibly get into the Big 12 and get in that Big 12 title game and kind of make a run and sneak their way into the playoffs there. But Jack, switching it back to the NFL, I wanted
and Blake has left our show, and he has to go do other things tonight. So we thank Blake for joining our show, and
absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt, Blake, but what else do you got for us on the show today?
So I wanted to use the opportunity of previewing not this weekend's game, but the next Thursday's game, which is obviously Thanksgiving, and I want to use the opportunity to just give a big shout out to a team that plays in Michigan called the Detroit Lions. Obviously, they play every Thanksgiving in addition to the Cowboys. Usually on Thanksgiving, we're all making our turkey. We're preparing our side dishes, and when the Lions game comes on, we say, "Oh, the Lions, they play every Thanksgiving. They're a lousy team. I'm waiting for the Cowboys game." Not so fast, as Blake Limberger would say. The Lions and Cowboys couldn't have different fortunes this season in particular, where the Cowboys are pretty unwatchable and a bit of a circus, and where Detroit might have a claim as being the best team in football right now. So they're hosting the Bears on Thanksgiving, that early game. The Giants are coming to Dallas. It's a fight for the top draft pick, that one is. But I just want to talk about the Lions a little bit and kind of give them sort of a bit of love, and just talk about how good of a season they're having. They're obviously, I think this week they're playing against the Colts, and they absolutely crushed the Jaguars last week as well, putting up points galore. I personally think they're the team to beat, not only in the NFC, possibly in the NFL, given the fact they're going to have home field advantage all throughout the NFC playoffs. I don't know if either of you would pick anybody else to come out of the NFC, but they kind of seem like a complete team from what I've seen so far this season.
Yeah, I think they're the best in the NFC. I think the only other team, I hate to say it, that might come up in the NFC would be the Eagles. As I said, I hated to say it.
That's tough for Mike to say, Jack.
I know.
But let me ask you this, Jack. Do you see a scenario where the Eagles go into Ford Field and beat the Lions in the playoffs? Because I personally, if the game was in Philadelphia, I might have a different opinion. But Jack, do you really see the Eagles going into Detroit and getting a victory in the playoffs? I don't know. It just seems I just don't really picture it right now in my head.
I doubt it, but I just don't see it. I mean, look, Detroit's gonna be really in it. The crowd's gonna be so electric. It'll be loud at Ford Field. It'll be a tough atmosphere, and yeah, I'm gonna say that's gonna be highly unlikely. It's just for it to happen, but yeah, I'm not giving them enough chance for them, 0% chance for them to win that game at Detroit. It's going to be tough, but I don't see it happening.
Well, I mean, if you think about it as well, it's an indoor stadium. It's a team that can move the ball effectively, and it's a crowd that's been dying to have, winning football in their city for a long time. So they're obviously going to make noise. And so I think the fact that they're 9-1 right now, and they look like they're going to have the best record in the NFC, like that definitely clears out their path to the Super Bowl for sure. Obviously, on paper, everything's easier to say on paper, right? And you have to go out there and win the games, obviously, when it comes to January. But right now, their path looks pretty clear in the NFC compared to the AFC, right? So
that's right. And if you think about it, the Lions had the lead and had momentum in last year's NFC Championship game, only it was played on the road at Leo Stadium, in an outdoor stadium at the 49ers. And you think about it, you look back at that game, even though it's in the past, that there were some questionable calls of how Dan Campbell should have really kicked the field goals and not have to go aggressive on fourth down like many football coaches do. It's really the little things that really come down to plays that matter. Whenever a game is on the line.
Yeah. Have you noticed, seems that a lot of coaches are being aggressive this year. A lot more teams are going, instead of kicking a field goal, going for the fourth down. Have you noticed that, Jack?
I've definitely noticed that, Jackson.
I was aware of it. I've seen it happen in college, and the pro level. So it's really very common. So I think you're going to see this trend more and more of it happening, and it's really going to be something that the sport's going to really going to be leaned towards. And since you're not a fan of it, I get it, but it's really something you're going to have to get used to for the sport going forward.
No, I'm actually a big fan of it. I mean, it doesn't always work. It worked for the Bills last week. They had 4th and 2, and Josh Allen scrambled for a 26-yard touchdown, but it did not work for my Commanders on 4th and 2 where they could have kicked the field goal to take the lead from the Eagles, and just from the way the play, was run, they just didn't. They were short, and then the Eagles went ahead and scored another touchdown, or actually two. So
And yeah, and to really answer your question, Mike, on how you guys lost the game, it was all done by one man, none other than Saquon Barkley. He was hard to slow down. The Commanders had too many missed tackles. They couldn't get after him. And that was really the difference maker right there, Mike. So, really, why the Commanders lost is because of Saquon Barkley taking it over and and taking it over, being the game difference maker in the fourth quarter. That's really what led the Eagles to beat to beat your team, Mike.
yeah, no, I no argument.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. Certainly the decision to go for it on 4th and short, obviously situation dependent. If you feel like you have the hot hand, you're trying to quiet a crowd deep into the territory kind of thing. And we see teams be aggressive. A lot of top teams like Detroit, we mentioned, Dan Campbell certainly likes to go for it on 4th and short, and they have good conversion rate.
Yeah.
So definitely something that I think we'll see that a lot of that in the playoffs, especially. I think teams that are maybe not favored and are in a hostile environment, getting a 4th and short, maybe at that midfield line or somewhere around the 50-yard line, can really give you that positive momentum that you want. And the risk reward versus punting at your own 40 versus like going for it on like a 4th and 5 or something. Like, I think the risk reward there is certainly something that, like Mike rightly points out, that we certainly see a lot. But Jack, as well, I wanted to just preview a couple of the other games we have on Thanksgiving, and we've got a Black Friday game as well. But firstly, the other Thanksgiving game, New York Dallas. Like I said, it's two bad teams, not too interested. But Miami at Green Bay is an interesting one. Green Bay certainly still has playoff aspirations in that division, as well as the Minnesota Vikings as well, 8-2 and 7-3 respective. I think the interesting thing about the NFC North is that a lot of these teams haven't played each other up to this point. So we saw the Green Bay Chicago game last week. Obviously, that was a pretty crazy ending, right? Where
that was the Packers just survived on what would have been a game-winning field goal for the Bears, which Matt LaFleur extends his winning streak 13-0 against the Bears, which is
the Packers have their numbers, don't they?
Hard to put in awards, but yeah, there was definitely a lot of heartbreak out there in Chicago for those Bear fans who were feeling it until it didn't happen. So that's really how it all went down.
Yeah, and that's certainly a matchup that's been one-sided over the past couple of seasons for sure. But I think we'll kind of see that division even out a little bit. You've got obviously Chicago's maybe they're with that loss to Green Bay last week, they're not really in that discussion for that division, but Minnesota and Green Bay will certainly be fighting for that playoff positioning come later in the year. I think they end up playing each other. They already played each other early on in the season. They have one more game as well, the second to last game of the season. So want to keep an eye on for sure. But that Thanksgiving game with Miami going to Green Bay will be a fun one. Miami, obviously, warm weather team going to Green Bay on Thanksgiving. Probably not. I wouldn't bet on the Dolphins, just spoiler alert. But as well, we got a Black Friday game for the first time, right, Jack? That's a bit of an interesting one, with not necessarily interesting for the teams that are playing, but just the fact that we have a Black Friday game. The Raiders going to Kansas City.
We do, Blake. It's the second year in a row. That Prime Video will be televising the game on a streaming service rather than just over the air cable TV broadcast. And this year it will be at Arrowhead Stadium, the Kansas City Chiefs. You think about it. We mentioned the Chiefs lost to the Bills to end their 9-0 winning streak, which, by the way, in the history of the franchise of the Chiefs, no team has gone 10-0, by the way. So that's a stat to really to really keep your eye on, especially in history books says. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. But yeah, the Raiders and the Chiefs. Well, I mean, last time the Raiders played in Kansas City, you go back to Christmas Day where they beat the Chiefs in some of the first loss last season, and that just and that what would be the naughty list for the Kansas City Chiefs fans last Christmas, and that's really how it all went down. But I think this year Kansas City will bounce back hopefully after what was a what was their some of the first loss season, and I think that Kansas City will bounce back and regroup, and hopefully Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and those and Patrick Mahomes' favorite targets, who those guys, Travis Kelce, and maybe Taylor Swift will be there. I doubt it, but I think Kansas City will find a way to bounce back. Even though I will remind you that the Bills are 3-1 against the Chiefs in the regular season, but you think about it in the postseason, they are 0-3 in the postseason. That's just that's just that's just something
It's a good stat.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's just something that really gives you the margin of how really all plays out. That's just really, I think, how it's always going to trend in the NFL each year for anyone who's not a fan of the Chiefs or for anyone in the NFL. They're going to have to deal with it, get used to it, and that's just and that's just how life is in the NFL. In during these days, currently in today's game.
Yeah, and I think I briefly mentioned it last week when we were previewing the Buffalo Kansas City game, but do we think maybe it's actually in a weird way beneficial for Kansas City to kind of get that first loss out of the way? Obviously, they want to beat Buffalo. They're kind of their AFC rivals, but I don't know, Mike, do you think like in a
Oh,
weird
I think
way
it's
it's
a, I,
a bit
I
of a
think
monkey
it's a
off the
good,
back, right?
yeah, I think it's a good thing for the Chiefs to have lost the game.
I mean, we've seen that kind of weigh on teams going
Hmm.
deep into the season trying to keep that perfect record intact, and Chiefs kind of just want to focus on the playoffs. They're not too concerned about the
Yeah.
regular season ultimately at this point.
Well, that's a lot of pressure, and not having that monkey on your back anymore bodes well. A lot to be seen when they go into Charlotte this weekend and play the Panthers. They should win without too much problem.
A trap game?
You never know on any given Sunday.
I mean, it
But
would be like the most Panthers thing ever if they actually end up beating if Bryce Young ends up beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But
yeah, it'd be
Wouldn't that
almost
be
like
something?
Vanderbilt beating Alabama.
there you go.
So things happen.
Strange things happen, Jack. You never know, right?
Especially in college football and the NFL, where which is why there's always a thing that there's always going to be. You never know you never know what kind of play or how the game's going to turn out, and that's why you have a thing called any given Saturday and Sunday. That's just how the sport is, and you got to be
Right.
passionate about it sometimes. And
Mhm.
that's just the way it goes sometimes in the sport.
Spot on. Spot on.
So, Mike, I do want to get your thoughts in. I was reading an article on ESPN that the MLB is, well, obviously, about the media rights with their regional sports channels. That really, along with the it. So I was reading an article on the ESPN website saying that it shows that with the television rights, along with the Bally Sports, you know, kind of the if you call it buyout, which is something what really which is really they have been dealing with bankruptcy and all the TV money that they're dealing with, and Mike, and Mike, you live in the area. An example of that would be the Monumental Sports Network, which bought out NBC Sports Washington, who broadcast the Washington Capitals. So
Hmm.
all about it. You live in the area, you know what it's like, and I want to get your take and reaction about it because really, really the Valley Sports really, I think, is in bankruptcy, and they just somehow just put themselves out of business. And really, the way I look at it is that another sports regional broadcast, like, it's bought out by them, and just for the TV money, and really that's really what it comes down to. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, Mike. And since you follow baseball much more than we do, as a fan, I just want to get your thoughts on it and your reaction to this news, and want to get your take and thoughts on it, for your reaction of the news that just broke for the so-called regional sports network channel they spewed.
Yeah.
Thoughts.
I haven't read that article. It sounds very interesting. But I think from a finance perspective, I think Major League Baseball is very healthy. They'll get somebody else to come in and broadcast the games. So I'm not too concerned with that. Monumental is certainly big. I'd love to see the Monumental get the Nationals broadcast, get it out of Masson,
Mm.
which is owned by the Orioles, which was part of the deal to get the Nationals or the Expos to move to Washington in the first place. But now the big thing in baseball, you're talking about baseball, is this spring training, they're going to have the automatic ball and strike count in several of the minor league parks with the
Robot umpires.
Robot umpires calling the balls and strikes. The rumor has it Major League Baseball, if this goes well, might implement that in the 2026 season. So stay tuned to that. That's probably the biggest news I've heard about Major League Baseball.
Well, we certainly see a lot of missed calls, certainly still in Major League Baseball, right, Jack? So I mean, I wouldn't be against that.
Talk about a future, and really of how the world has changed with really, it's all about technology. So I think, for what Mike's point is, that really really high tech and technology, and really really how things have changed. And I think that's where the sport is going to, or maybe it'll try out in all the four major post as well. It's looking to be headed that way, and I think we'll definitely keep our eye out for that. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. In this world, we're all going green. We want to go all electric in the 2030s, and with Elon Musk and Tesla. And you're right. I think this world does need to change, and I think that MLB is really a starting part of it.
Yeah, the managers will have to figure out somebody else to yell at. They won't have the umpire. But anyway, it's going to be
just
interesting.
Like point to the sky and yell at like a satellite or something that's controlling it. Something like that. There's always somebody to yell at, right?
Yeah, maybe
So,
they should do something like Mars, which would be even probably history making for the entire world, I would say, which I feel like would be really cool. But you never know.
And there's rumors the new stadium down in Tampa for the Rays.
In Roblox. That's right.
Roadblocks. Yeah. So maybe the Rays might be potentially moving out of that area.
It could be off to Montreal.
They should go back to Europe or Asia or Japan, or get yourself. They should get the heck
what
out
a road trip.
Just be a touring ball club, yeah.
Yeah. St. Petersburg is really, I think, you're south of the equator, too hot for a baseball game down there.
Next year you're going to have two major league teams playing in minor league parks.
That's right. Yeah. Not necessarily what they would have hoped, but I guess it's more so the promise of a long term. I guess in Vegas they do have at least
Vegas
plans, right?
That's going to happen, because they've already demolished what was on the lot where they're going to build the new athletics new stadium. So, and that's already passed. So that's going to happen. Where the Rays end up finding a home, that's remains to be seen. But talking about stadiums, at least the RFK site passed the Senate committee this week, and the vote's going to go to the full Senate now to determine whether or not the District of Columbia gets the 99-year lease for the RFK site. And if that happens, they're going to build a new home for the Commanders in Washington. So
I'm sure that will be popular amongst the fan base, right?
I think so. Certainly be popular with me.
Get out of Maryland, right?
Well, I think they're the Washington Commanders. They need to be playing in Washington.
Not them. I never heard of any Maryland Commanders, Jack. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Well, if only you're referring to the Maryland Terrapins, which is a whole other conversation, even though it's in College Park, not in like in that part of the DMV, for those locals, they call it up there. So that
Well, yeah.
that's but that's in a whole other conversation than a different topic. But yeah, I mean, if you really do, but yeah, we'll certainly be watching that and keep our eye on it for sure, and monitor it, which I'm sure my mom and dad and I will read articles and keep our eye on for sure. But you know, to your point about the Commanders moving to District of Columbia and its 99-year lease, I mean, Mayor Bowser, their mayor of DC, had some mixed feelings about this and connections. Just I think had no idea about this approval and what they should be doing for the city itself. And I think that the Commanders just, in my opinion, if you're going to be putting it in my problem is that if you are going to be putting it in government land rather than just in a state like Virginia or Maryland, then how are you going to then how are you going to then my question is, how are you going to find a way to build parking or have some walking distance to the stadium for those locals who live up there? And that's my only question mark. So I think that the fans up in DC should be very excited for no matter what happens. But in my opinion, I just think that they should just really really look at
well, there's already a subway stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a multi-use development. So it's not going to be just a stadium and parking, but to be continued. I'll share when I hear other news. So what do you got in looking at for the college games this weekend?
Well, we just talked about that a little bit, and the latest I got for the college football rankings, as of right now, the Oregon Ducks remain number one, and then if I look at if I look at the last few meetings, we have had South Carolina and LSU even in playoff contention, and ending their winning streaks from 9 games for both of those schools, which we're talking about Florida and South Carolina perspective. But overall,
Jack, I think the interesting matchup to keep an eye on this week for playoff ranking implications will be Indiana traveling to Columbus, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, big showdown,
5
big
versus
game, 2. Big game. Maybe that's bigger than Michigan, Ohio State. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But that will definitely be one to keep our eye on for sure for the committee. That will be for sure. It'll definitely be one to keep our eye on for sure, depending on what happens. So now I've heard a lot of chatter and for ESPN and for all sports talk people in the community saying that if, let's say, Indiana loses to Ohio State and it's a close game, then everybody has a different opinion on this. But what I say to that is they win the game even if it's a close loss. But let's say if the game's not close for Indiana and they lose, then I think we'll be having a whole different conversation. So yeah, so if Ohio State wins, but if it's in a blowout, but let's say if Indiana wins, let's say they fall short to say 2 points or 1, then I think they would be definitely getting in the college football playoff no matter what happens, and that's just how I feel about it. And I think that it's going to be a tough environment out there in the shoe in Columbus, but for Indiana, that is, since you're 10-0, going up against a
9-1.
Yeah, 9-1 Buckeyes. Yeah, the 2 ranked against the 5 ranked. So yeah, it's going to be one to watch and for sure. And
Oh, so I think the whole kind of argument slash discussion is saying, well, who was Indiana really played slash beat this year? Obviously, you can only beat who's in front of you, right? And so they haven't gotten any really big wins. You know, some of the teams they've beaten this year, Washington, Michigan's, aren't really the same teams they were last year. So I think honestly, for a team like Indiana that's not usually in this discussion, I think it's a bit harsh to kind of be you know, fine picking, their wins and losses. I mean, they're undefeated in late November, so I think we'll really get a good test of how actually much of a contender they are this weekend, right, Mike, in
Oh, I
Columbus?
think so. Yeah, the strength of schedule is big, but Ohio State's starting center is had a Achilles heel issue this week. He's out for the season. So he's the third starting offensive lineman that the Ohio State Buckeyes have lost this year. So that may or may not have a play in the game. And they both got great defenses.
Right. So it could be a low scoring game, maybe.
Yeah. And Ohio State's one loss was to Oregon by 1 point.
The top team in the country. Yeah.
At Oregon.
Right.
So, if the Buckeyes win, then they're definitely going to go to the dance.
To be honest, I think Ohio State is going to be in no matter what. I would assume even if Indiana loses to Ohio State and they finish the season with one loss, they'll still sneak in maybe as a lower seed, right?
Mhm.
But obviously Ohio State's a 12-point favorite. Obviously they're at home, so they're going to be favorites. But I mean, 12 points is a lot even for coming up against a team that's ranked fifth. So
yeah, well, that may even bode for Indiana to feel a little disrespected. Here they are, 10-0, and they're 12-point underdogs.
that's a little bulletin board material, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
certainly, yeah, that's certainly the game to keep an eye on for playoff implications. The other teams, really made up of, teams from the SEC that are kind of beating up on each other. But at this point, you would expect most of these teams to win their remaining games. So, like, for example, Ole Miss has Florida,
going to the
Mississippi.
swamp down in Gainesville, and I
Yeah,
think
but they're not really that.
somebody-
They're not really
how
that
did I
great.
just walk them out down there in the swamp, Blake?
And then Georgia, obviously, they're playing a cupcake this week, and then they have the game against Tech the weekend after the Georgia rivalry game, and then Tennessee similarly. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put a Vanderbilt past pulling an upset there, given some of the big wins that the Commodores have had this year. But you would expect them to kind of win out and maybe secure their playoff status. So similarly to Alabama as well, Auburn's not really up to much this year, are they? So
yeah, it'd be interesting if Vanderbilt travels to LSU and the two coaches were coached at Notre Dame together.
correct. Yeah, they're might be a bit of a battle there.
A little, yeah.
In Baton Rouge for sure. But I think the other game, Jackson, that's kind of just an interesting matchup is Army against Notre Dame, right? Another ranked versus ranked
at Yankee Stadium
in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I mean, am I going crazy or Jack? Army's 9-0. I mean, are they being a little disrespected?
They're number 18 in the country.
I mean, look, nobody's really talking about them and are not even following about it. They just keep winning games and nobody's even.
I mean, they beat Rice for God's sakes.
Not getting a lot of respect, Blake, and they still find ways to win the game. Like, how's this happen?
Well, I think they've played to their strengths, and obviously we know Army likes to play smash mouth football and they like to run the ball.
Black Knights of the Hudson.
And they've got people have been sleeping on them, you would say, for most of this year, and they've got a big opportunity. This is really their only, their only like big game. Obviously the Army Navy game is a big game, but their only game against a top level opponent on their entire schedule away. Well, not away at Notre Dame, they're playing at Yankee Stadium, obviously, so which kind of makes it a bit of a
home game for the Army.
Technically, they're in New York still, right? So
yeah,
that might play to their.
They'll bring the whole core.
Exactly. You would argue that
all the cadets into the Yankee Stadium.
I mean, that's the most talent that's been in Yankee Stadium this whole year, right? I mean, given the way the World Series went, right? All right, all right.
Well,
I'll stop.
let's just hope they don't have any ball drops.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
As
gonna
much
be.
as you love that, that would be very cool. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But it would be really cool to see though. But yeah, think about it. This would be the second football stadium series this season. Which last week Ohio State played Northwestern at Wrigley Field, and we all know Ohio State crushed Northwestern and won that game in a blowout. So, yeah, I bet you there were a bunch of Ohio State Buckeye fans that lived in the Chicagoland area, although it was Northwestern home crowd there. But I bet you there a bunch of Ohio State fans are do happen to live in the Chicagoland area, especially in those parts in the Midwest. So it's definitely a lot of Buckeye fans out there in Chicago, and I could definitely guarantee you there's a lot of them out there since it's really their territory out there in the Midwest. So the Army Knights kind of the same way since they're up the road from West Point, which is about an hour drive to the Bronx. So yeah, definitely a very similar fan advantage compared to last week. But you're right. It is it is that kind of feel for those both of those fans in those stadium series for those teams.
Yeah, no, I think that will be one to certainly keep an eye on. And Notre Dame, I think, will have playoff aspirations. I don't know necessarily they'll be considered one of the favorites, but you know, not to throw shade at the Fighting Irish, but there probably is a little bit of big name bias there as well, right? With Notre Dame getting the benefit of the doubt from the selection committee, just given the fact they're Notre Dame, right? So, yeah, I think if they win the rest of their games, obviously they have the game against USC as well, which is no walk in the park going out to Southern California. But they'll certainly be a team that would fancy themselves come this playoff format, certainly as well. So yeah, some interesting matchups to keep an eye on for sure. And I think we'll see some interesting permutations with the playoff rankings because me and Jackson are watching the rankings reveal show on Tuesday. And, you know, I think people might not realize sort of the way the format works. They made it sound super simple when they were introducing it, but then they ended up going through all these different permutations. Like, is this as simple as you're making it out to be? But essentially the teams that get the bye is the top four conference champions essentially. So if we have the teams that end up winning their conference, so presumably Oregon would have a chance to win their conference, Texas with the SEC, but it's going to end up favoring a team like Boise State, which you haven't mentioned, for possibly sneaking into the playoffs because so far they've put up a really good resume and they're in the Mountain West Conference, but they would end up getting a better playoff position because they are win their conference and the committee values them as they're currently ranked 12th overall in their season. So they're a team, for example, that could end up doing something. You know,
they have the number one rusher in the
Ashton
in the country.
Yeah,
Ashton Jenny.
Gentry, yeah, he's been a real revelation, and certainly if he ends up having a couple of big playoff games as well, his sort of stock is going to even increase more than it is at this point in time. So
yeah, let me share some breaking news I just heard. On the hockey front, they just announced Alex Ovechkin's got a broken leg. He's going to be out at least from between 4 and 6 weeks.
Ooh.
Which is too bad because he had scored 15 goals in the first 18 games. He's only 27 goals away from Gretzky's record, but he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks.
That was going to be my next question is how I know he's never going to break the points record because the amount of points that Gretzky put up is like ridiculous, but I know he's not too far away from goals, right?
Yeah, Gretzky's 894 goals. Ovechkin is at 868 goals.
26 away from tying him. Yeah.
Wish Ovechkin well and hope he recovers quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of one of the last legends that we have playing in the game, right? Obviously we have Crosby still there or thereabouts. Stamkos is still playing, obviously, but in terms of historic numbers, historic players, playing for one team as well, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
people kind
he's
of
always
underrate.
played for the Capitals. Yeah.
We see in other sports players changing teams when maybe they're not contending for the playoffs. But I think getting that cup victory a couple of years ago kind of cemented his legacy in Washington, and I think he'll obviously retire as a Capital. But yeah, hopefully he gets back healthy and is able to. I think he'll be able to get that goals. I mean, he was for his age, he's pretty good production up to this point this season. So
absolutely,
but
absolutely. So anyway,
yeah.
I wish him well. I just wanted to share that. I just heard that like breaking news.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, certainly that'll be a big moment once he's able to get that goals record for sure. That'll be an impressive stat, no doubt.
Yeah, and before we move on to that topic, I just like to say that to your point, Blake, that him and Crosby played for all one franchise, and and sooner rather than later they'll call it a career, whenever their time comes. But yeah, well, they will definitely. But yeah, the Crosby Ovechkin rivalry will definitely be one to remember, and for the sport and the NHL and the history books. Yeah, it will definitely be one to remember for sure for many years to come.
Yeah, you know what's just quickly while we're talking about NHL, I was looking at the just like the points table, and there's like a picture of Gretzky when he passed Eddie Howe for overall points at 1850, and then after he passed Eddie Howe, or sorry, not Eddie Howe, Gordie Howe at uh, 1850 overall points, and he went and accumulated another 1,000 on top of that. So he's got 2,857 points, and the next highest would be Yager at 1,921. So that just kind of goes to show you how much of a complete player he was. Obviously, Ovechkin might end up passing him for goals, but yeah, just another reminder at how crazy his numbers were in Gretzky's career. All right, Jack, I think we've gotten to the point of the show now where we can do a little bit of a Thanksgiving discussion. And I know a lot of our viewers and listeners will be celebrating Thanksgiving with their families, not today, but a week from today on Thanksgiving, which is the 28th. So I thought maybe we could just share a couple of fun Thanksgiving traditions and meals. Obviously, we grew up in the same household, and so we do all of the nice Thanksgiving traditions with watching football. And we like to obviously have our usual food of turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing. I personally, in the past, have always enjoyed making a nice green bean casserole as well as one of our nice side dishes. I know our sister Caroline is always a big fan of the sweet potatoes as well, making various dishes involving that. And then of course watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and then the dog show after that with kind of some of the Cowboys Lions football games intertwined between that. But Jack, I'll just ask you, what are some of your favorite traditions and what does an ideal Thanksgiving morning, afternoon look like to you?
Well, one of my favorite things growing up as a kid is that we would always do this wishbone thing back at Grammy and Baba's house, and we would always pass along and always do those family tradition things. That's something that I always enjoy a lot every single year, and that's just something that I had great memory on. And we'd always pass along to different family members from different gatherings that we all do together. And about the food, I have to say that I know that Uncle Mike is very close to well, he's kind of on the edge of the Mason-Dixon slash Yankee line there, since it's kind of near the Northeast, which you know how it is. I've been on this road before. That really you get the idea. Like first of all, in the South you have like suburban deep fried turkeys, and up north where we grew up, which every year we would go to Riverton Country Club with the family growing up as a kid, and they would always bring out the turkey and the food, and how it was a very nice Thanksgiving dinner feast for us that we would do every year growing up, and I just always have I enjoyed that. And really, green bean casserole is good, but really, you have stuff like sweet potato and different casseroles and macaroni and cheese, and I think people in the South have sweet potato and pecan pie, and
Yep.
up north we have traditional pumpkin pie and
Yep.
apple pie and
Sure. All the pies.
and really they have different types of cranberry sauce, but
Yep.
but really you have stuffing. You have different types of stuffing from the north and the south, and that's one reason why I want to give a shout out to Joe Madden, because he brought the idea of a turducken, which is really a
Yep. John
Thanksgiving
Madden. Yep.
start. That's right, and that's how it all first got started. And yeah, I think that really the idea of different turkeys and cranberries, and which was used as a plucky side dish, and depending on what part of the country you're at, there's always going to be a different type of side or entree or dessert of a Thanksgiving dish, and really depends on where you live. I just think depending on which family you're with, no matter who you're with, it just depends on it just depends on what kind of food or particular item you have on Thanksgiving for a Thanksgiving item or dish. It's really kind of depends on kind of the item and piece that you have, depending on what family member or type of food you have, which I know that is really part of what you do every year with the whole fam with for all the whole families that are watching out there. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Mike? What are some of your favorite Thanksgiving foods / traditions?
Well, it's to me, it's the aroma. I mean, nothing smells better than Thanksgiving.
Ooh, the gravy.
And yeah, so Lori and I, we're vegetarians, but we get to cook everything. So we've got a 22-pound turkey.
Ooh.
And we got a big ham.
Nice.
And we got ourselves, the vegetarian loaf, and it's all the sides that we're going to have. This year we're going to make the sweet potatoes with apples and cranberries, and the mashed potatoes and the stuffings and all. So it's just the aromas and having people over, friends and family over, that help celebrate the day is what it's all about. Now, when I was a kid growing up, my grandmother put oysters in her stuffing.
Wow.
And that was a Virginia thing. So you put a little bit of sausage and some oysters in the stuffing and stuffed it inside the bird. And one of my favorite memories was with my grandfather. And when the turkey would be cooling after coming out of the oven, he would turn it over, and the underside of the turkey is what he'd call the oyster of the turkey. It's one of the juiciest, tenderest pieces of the turkey. He'd get one and I'd get one, and then we'd quickly flip it back over so nobody else noticed what we had done. So that's
a great memory.
That's one of my best memories of it. But I wish you guys the best and well, and eat lots and have a good nap.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Same to you, Mike and Jackson,
We
I
will
think.
and we'll be thinking of you, Mike, since we're not going to
Absolutely.
be on next week, which is a break for us because we need it. We just want to spend time. I just want to spend time with you, Blake, and the whole Griffey family, and
Absolutely.
that's what it's all about, and what we're here for. Spend time
Enjoy your first Thanksgiving in your new house.
Absolutely. We'll do some great cooking in the new appliances. Certainly.
Absolutely.
Sure will. It's gonna be great. I promise. You're definitely gonna enjoy it and believe it. It's gonna be great. You're just gonna love it. It's just gonna be great. Trust me.
Good.
It's gonna be great.
And I hope you get outside a little bit and toss the football around.
Oh yeah, got a little Thanksgiving pigskin is always in the offering, right?
Yes,
Oh yeah,
indeed.
we did that tradition a lot growing up with at Grammy and Baba's house too. So we done it before.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of Good Guy Sports, I want to thank Jackson and Mike and Blake Lineberger for joining us on today's show. And everybody out there, yes, and of course, take notice of, if you're on YouTube, of Jackson's lovely turkey gurkey hat. It's a Thanksgiving staple that I'm happy we were able to bring to the Good Guy Sports podcast. So if you're able to view it on YouTube, please go check it out. It's quite the piece of headwear, if I do say so myself. But I just want to say, on behalf of Good Guys Sports, thank you for listening, and I hope everyone out there has a great Thanksgiving. And we will be back with you soon in December after the holidays. So thank you, everyone, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Mike.